I've always been fascinated by the idea that wealth wasn't born with money, but with mystery. Before coins, before commerce as we know it, there was something deeper: rituals. Rituals that involved not just gold or possessions, but energy, intention, and connection with the divine. And the more I delved into ancient history, the more I discovered that great empires from Babylon to Egypt, from China to Rome prospered not only through their strategies, but through the spiritual secrets that guided their wealth. They believed that money was a mirror of the soul, a living force. That gold was not just metal, but condensed light, an earthly form of solar energy. That abundance did not come from outside, but from a pact between man and the invisible. There were chants, symbols, offerings, and sacred times when leaders and priests manipulated the flow of prosperity. These rituals were hidden, burned in destroyed libraries, erased by religions that feared the power of knowledge, but fragments survived. Some were inscribed on clay tablets, others engraved in forgotten temples, and some preserved by secret societies sworn to protect what they called the science of divine abundance. Today, after years of studying texts and ruins, I realize that what we call economics was born of magic. That the laws of prosperity that sustained ancient empires still vibrate, just waiting to be rediscovered. In this video, I'll walk you through these rituals not as archaeological curiosities, but as keys that shaped the destiny of entire nations. We'll decipher how kings and priests connected with invisible forces to attract wealth, and why the modern world has forgotten these practices. Get ready. What you're about to hear may change the way you view money forever. The first ritual, the Call of Babylon. They say wealth was born on the banks of the Euphrates. There, where the hot desert wind mingled with the aroma of sacred resins, the Babylonians believed that money was an extension of the god's blessing. There was no distinction between spirituality and prosperity. One sustained the other, like the sun and the shadow. On clay tablets found in Sippar and Uruk, there are records of rituals that united merchants and priests under the same purpose: to attract the energy of abundance. At midnight, before major trade exchanges, they washed their hands with olive myrrh and salt, symbols of purity and protection, and lit a copper flame. Before it, they uttered words in Sumerian that roughly translate as "May the gold come to me as the river meets the sea." The gesture was simple, but it carried a powerful intention, recognizing gold as a living being, a divine consciousness. They believed that by honoring money as a sacred force, it would respond in the form of prosperity. The secret was not to ask, but to invite Allah in the heart with the vibration of universal abundance. Interestingly, these rituals weren't restricted to the elite. Even peasants performed small ceremonies, burying coins under the floors of their homes to ensure abundance. Older families passed around amulets bathed in cedar oil, believing this aroma attracted the favor of Enki, the god of wisdom and water, the one who taught mankind how to transform clay into brick and ideas into wealth. And when I look at this today, I realize that these Babylonian rituals weren't just about money, but about the link between the human and the invisible, between work and mystery. They believed that prosperity was a dance, and gold, a sensitive partner that needed to be respected to continue flowing. Perhaps that is why, even after the fall of Babylon, the spirit of abundance continued to wander among civilizations, assuming new forms, new names, but keeping the same secret, that wealth always begins in the invisible. The second ritual, the gold of the gods in Egypt. Gold wasn't just metal, it was the very blood of the sun. The priest said that gold carried the Kai, the lifeblood of Ra, the sun god, and that each shining grain contained a fragment of divine consciousness. No other civilization treated wealth with such spiritual reverence. When the first rays of dawn touched the temples of Karnak or Luxor, the high priests performed what they called the awakening of gold. It was a silent ritual performed before the golden statues of the gods. They dipped their hands in bowls of honey and gold dust, raising them to the rising sun and chanting for enlightenment and prosperity. But they weren't asking for gold per se, they were asking for clarity of vision, the wisdom necessary to create and multiply. Gold was merely the mirror of this inner light. The pharaohs understood that true abundance arose from balance between order and chaos, between the visible and the hidden. Therefore, they maintained secret chambers where scribes and magicians recorded prosperity formulas, a combination of numbers, sounds, and symbols believed to open energy portals. One such text, The Book of Doors mentions that he who knows the secret name of wealth will never be in the shadow of scarcity. The power of these rituals was so feared that only the pharaoh and his closest priests could participate. The gold was purified with fire and water from the Nile, representing the masculine and feminine before being molded into offerings to the gods. And each offering had a specific intention: to protect the empire, multiply crops, strengthen the army, or ensure the throne's perpetuity. But the most curious thing is that, for them, gold should not be accumulated, and yes, circulate. When the gold stopped moving, it was said that the heart of the sun cooled. Therefore, temples and palaces were constantly rebuilt, renewing the flow of sacred energy. The secret of Egyptian wealth was not just in conquest, but in keep the gold alive, flowing like the Nile itself. And perhaps this is the point the modern world has forgotten: abundance is not possession, it is movement. And when gold ceases to circulate, it dies, and with it, the spirit of prosperity. The third ritual, the breath of Lakshmi. In ancient India, Vedic masters said that true wealth had a name, a face, and a scent. Its name was Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, beauty, and abundance. Her face was the reflection of harmony, and her perfume, jasmine and sandalwood, filled the temples on full moon days. While the West associated wealth with male power, Hindus understood something the modern world has forgotten: prosperity is feminine. It flourishes where there is beauty, gratitude, and flow. Therefore, every home was a temple, and every act of care from cleaning the floor to preparing a meal was seen as an offering to the goddess. The Vedic texts describe a daily ritual, Kaledasri Sukta, recited at sunrise. The practitioner would sit before a bowl of pure water, lotus petals, and a golden coin. While repeating ancient mantras, he would visualize Lakshmi's light descending upon his home, purify the environment, and awakening the dormant forces of prosperity. But there was a rule: the goddess only remained where there was respect, order, and generosity. A home in disharmony, with arguments, jealousy, or neglect, was considered a place where Lakshmi refused to dwell. Therefore, before each ritual, women would sweep the floor toward the front door, a symbolic gesture of removing whatever blocked the flow of abundance. Kings of the time, such as Chandragupta and Ashoka, followed these same principles on an imperial scale. In their palaces, they held ceremonies in which coins were thrown into the Ganges River, not as waste, but as an act of trust, a way of returning some of the energy received to nature. "He who holds gold loses its blessing," said an ancient Sanskrit proverb. And that's why, for millennia, India was seen not just as a kingdom of spices, but as the spiritual heart of wealth. Its rituals taught something that transcends time: that prosperity is not earned, is cultivated. Just as the lotus flower is born from the mud, true fortune is born from a serene mind, a clean heart, and a peaceful soul. The fourth ritual, the balance of the dragon. In ancient China, gold was not the ultimate symbol of wealth, balance era. Taoist masters taught that true fortune was born from the invisible alignment between Theki, the life force, and Theknife, the natural path of existence. Money, therefore, was seen merely as a consequence of the harmonious flow between heaven and earth. In villages near the Wudang Mountains, monks performed silent rituals at sunrise. They placed 3 coins on a wooden table and lit cinnamon incense between them. Then, they made the infinity gesture with their hands, tracing the symbol of balance in the air. This movement represented the eternal dance of yin and yang, the feminine and the masculine, giving and receiving, work and rest. According to them, money could only flow freely when these forces were in harmony within the person himself. There was an ancient belief that disorganized houses, full of broken objects or stuck in time, imprisoned the key and impeded the flow of abundance. From this arose one of the world's best-known practices, feng shui, the art of organizing space to allow the energy of prosperity to move unhindered. But feng shui, in its origins, was much more than decoration. It was a spiritual ritual. Each direction, color, and symbol was chosen to resonate with the guardian spirits that governed the home's material and emotional destiny. The Chinese emperors knew this. The construction of the Forbidden City, for example, followed perfect cosmic alignments. The central palace represented the heart, and the side courtyards symbolized the flow of Kabi, the imperial body. The goal was simple: to ensure that the empire breathed in harmony with the universe. And perhaps this was the secret of Chinese longevity. They did not seek to dominate money, but to him. Because, in Taoist thought, prosperity is not a prize, it is a mirror. It only reflects the internal state of whoever possesses it. When human beings are at peace, gold comes naturally. When there is imbalance, it disappears like water refusing to remain in a cracked vessel. The fifth ritual, the altar of reason and power. As the light of Greek thought began to spread across the Mediterranean, something profound happened. The gods continued to be honored, but man began to see himself as part of the divine. And with that, wealth ceased to be a gift from heaven and became a reflection of intelligence. In the cities of Athens and Sparta, there were temples dedicated not only to war or wisdom, but also Tautic, the goddess of fortune. She was depicted blindfolded, with a wheel in one hand and a cornucopia in the other. Philosophers said that this image held a secret that will show destiny in constant movement, and the cornucopia, the abundance that only remains where there is balance. It was a reminder that chance favors those who are ready and that luck, in fact, is only the result of understanding the natural flow of the universe. But it was in Rome that this knowledge took physical form. The Romans transformed spiritual rituals into economic structures. On home altars, known as Lauraria, families lit lamps every morning before images of the Lares god spirits that protected the home and prosperity. This act symbolized the awakening of the home to work, an invitation for the energy of money to circulate through effort and order. Meanwhile, Roman senators and generals followed a public ritual. Before any military campaign or financial decision, they made offerings to Jupiter and Fortune, asking for clarity and mastery over chaos. These rites were not superstition, they were the spiritual code of discipline of a nation that understood that wealth demands responsibility. Behind the glory of Rome, there was a hidden, almost philosophical principle: abundance belongs to those who honor the balance between mind and destiny. They believed that the empire prospered only because it was aligned with the cosmos, an idea inherited from the Egyptians and refined by the Greeks, but as Rome grew, faith gave way to greed. Gold ceased to be a symbol of harmony and became a weapon of conquest. And when gold began to serve the ego, the empire began to crumble slowly, like a flame dying for lack of air. It was in this collapse that a new type of ritual began to emerge, no longer to worship gods, but to control men. And this is where our story moves on to the next secret, the one that the medieval occult orders tried to hide from the world. The sixth ritual, the invisible gold of the Templars. When Rome fell, the world plunged into darkness. Faith was centralized, knowledge was hidden, and gold, once again, became feared. But in the shadows, a new brotherhood began to emerge, men who traveled between the sacred and the profane, between the altar and the battlefield. They called them Sylvestemplars. Officially, they were knights of faith. But those who have studied their symbols, their seals, and their writings know that they guarded something more, an ancient code, inherited from the civilizations that came before them. The Templars believed that prosperity was a pact between man and the divine, and that gold, when purified by intention, could become a tool of light. On silent nights in the abbeys, secret rituals were performed in which gold was dipped in holy water, representing the fusion between the material and the spiritual. They repeated verses in Latin that echoed the same principle as the Egyptians and Babylonians: gold is light, and light is consciousness. With each ceremony, they believed they were refining not only the metal, but also their spirit, transforming ego into wisdom. It was from them that the concept of modern bank. The Templars created the first international financial network, allowing kings and merchants to transport wealth safely between continents. But for them, every transaction carried spiritual weight. Money was not meant to serve greed, it was meant circular with purpose, because accumulation without light generated corruption. In manuscripts hidden beneath cathedrals, alchemist monks recorded the secret that drove them: the true transmutation is not of lead into gold, but of ignorance into consciousness. Alchemy, therefore, was not just a quest for material wealth, but for enlightenment. Physical gold was merely the visible symbol of an inner transformation, the achievement of harmony between body, mind, and soul. But like any light that shines too brightly, the Templars' power attracted fear. They were persecuted, betrayed, and burned, but their knowledge survived, fragmented, in the hands of secret societies that kept the thread of ancient wisdom alive. And it was this thread that later guided thinkers, kings, and scientists to rediscover the language of gold not as a metal, but as conscious energy. The seventh ritual, the Golden Code of Rebirth. After centuries of silence and fear, Europe began to breathe again. Once dark cities flourished with new ideas, and ancient Greek and Arabic manuscripts, forgotten in monasteries, began to circulate again. It was the beginning of a new era, their renaissance, when man looked up to the sky and, for the first time in a long time, saw himself again as part of the divine. The artists and philosophers of that time believed that God expressed himself through harmony. And it was in this search for perfect balance that one of the most powerful and mysterious symbols in history emerged, the golden ratio, or golden section. Leonardo da Vinci, Botticelli, and Michelangelo saw in it God's own signature on creation, a number that governed everything from the spiral of shells to the shape of temples and the human body. But behind the mathematics, there was a ritual. Before beginning a work, Renaissance masters like Leonardo performed a silent act of connection. They washed their hands in water laced with petals and gold dust, lit a candle, and drew a perfect circle, a symbol of wholeness and eternal abundance. This gesture represented the beginning of something sacred, the marriage between the spiritual and the material, the union of divine inspiration with human action. The alchemists, in turn, saw the same principle in another form. In their workshops, they mixed metals and herbs not only to create gold, but to understand the mystery of creation. They said that whoever understood the cycle of gold would also be able to understand the cycle of the soul, because both obey the same law. What is pure attracts what is eternal. It was from this time that the term was born: great work, the process of transforming chaos into harmony, fear into wisdom, poverty into abundance. The kings and patrons who funded these arts knew that beauty generated wealth. And the artists understood that gold, when touched by art, ceased to be metal and became emis. The Renaissance was not just an artistic revolution, it was the moment when the world rediscovered a divine prosperity code, the understanding that everything that is beautiful, balanced, and alive naturally attracts abundance. The eighth ritual, the oath of the new world, the sound of sails cutting through the sea heralded a new era. The century of navigation had begun, and man armed with maps, astrolabes, and faith set out in search of what he called infinite wealth. But what few people knew was that, behind each expedition, there were silent rituals that dated back to the ancient temples of Egypt and Babylon. Before each voyage, the navigators and financiers met in closed chambers. They lit candles before golden globes, traced circles on the floor, and said prayers to Mercury, the god of trade and roads, asking for vision, luck, and protection. The sea was seen as a mirror of the human soul, unpredictable, vast, full of secrets, and anyone who dared to face it had to make peace with the invisible forces of destiny. Explorers believed that the ocean tested every man's heart, the greedy sank. Those who maintained respect and reverence for nature came away with their hands full. The logbooks of some captains reveal curious prayers and rights, coins thrown overboard, letters written in blood, gold amulets hidden under the sails, all repeating, in different ways, the same ancient message: gold only belongs to those who honor the journey. But there was a profound change. Gold, which once represented light and consciousness, was now hunted as if it were the very soul of the world. European crowns transformed the sacred into politics, temples into banks. And the symbol of abundance became a frantic race for power. And, as always happens when the balance is broken, the price was high, greed replaced reverence. Commerce flourished, but the spirit of prosperity, the one born of harmony with the unseen, began to fade. Humanity had discovered how to dominate the physical world, but had forgotten how to communicate with the spiritual world. Yet among sailors, scientists, and Freemasons, there were those who understood what was really happening. They knew that the world's gold was nothing more than a reflection of inner gold, and that true wealth was not in conquered lands, but in awakened consciences. And it was this memory, this surviving spark of ancient knowledge, that kept the flame of abundance alive until the next chapter of history, when the revolution of the mind would replace rituals with reasoning once and for all. The ninth ritual, the machine and the light. With the awakening of reason and machines, man began to believe that he could replace the divine with logic. In the 18th century, in the factories of London, Paris, and Vienna, every gear symbolized power, and every forged metal represented progress. But behind this apparent triumph lay a silent and subtle ritual, repeated by entrepreneurs, inventors, and philosophers, the ritual of discipline and intention. Before starting any venture, they commonly drew up plans like astrological charts, analyzing schedules, cycles, and patterns. Some drew inspiration from ancient alchemical treatises, believing that success would only come if the venture's energy was aligned with the right moment. Gold was now transformed into capital, coins into numbers. And the ancient respect for prosperity present in Babylon, Egypt, and India began to be measured in profits and efficiency. Still, among books and laboratories, small groups preserved the essence of ancient rituals. There were societies that studied sacred geometry and natural patterns, applying them to architecture and business in the hope that internal harmony continued to generate external abundance. They understood that, without this connection, no matter how much wealth a man accumulated, true power remained unattainable, an ancient law that spanned centuries. The Industrial Revolution brought progress, but also a silent warning. Gold can be won with force and strategy, but true abundance depends on respect, balance, and awareness. Every moving machine, every counted coin, carried a distant echo of the temples, the altars, and the mantras that, for millennia, had taught the same principle. Wealth is energy that flows, not something you possess permanently. And that is why, even today, as I look at the modern world, I feel that we are on the verge of a great awakening. Ancient rituals haven't disappeared. They're just waiting to be rediscovered, reinterpreted, incorporated into our era, and capable of transforming the way we perceive prosperity. The next and final ritual, the 10th, will take us to the contemporary world, where money seems independent of any mystery. But if we look closer, we realize that the ancient principles are still alive, hidden in plain sight. The 10th ritual, the hidden abundance of the modern world. We live in a time when everything seems tangible, measurable, and independent of spirituality. But if we look closely, we will see that modern wealth still responds to the same laws that guided Babylonian temples, Egyptian altars, and Indian mantras. What changed was the form, not the essence. Today, ancient rituals manifest themselves in more subtle attitudes and habits. Successful entrepreneurs have something in common: a quiet reverence for the flow of energy around them. They plan, study, observe patterns, and respect the natural cycle of things. They know that abundance is not forced, but cultivated. Just as the Babylonians invited gold, the Egyptians awakened the sun, and the Hindus invited Lakshmi into their homes. The 10th modern ritual consists of fulfillment and conscious intention. Before making big decisions, these individuals create their own altars, an organized desk, a clear visualization of goals, gratitude rituals, or even meditative pauses. Every action is charged with purpose, just as the ancients lit candles, recited mantras, or made offerings. Gold may not shine, as it once did, but the energy of prosperity responds to the same respect and discipline that guided kings, priests, and alchemists. Another essential point is the circulation of wealth. The ancients knew that stagnant gold lost its power. Today, money that is stagnant, stored without purpose, loses its potential. Donation, conscious investment, fair exchange, these are modern ways of maintaining the flow, the same principle that has spanned millennia. And perhaps the biggest secret is the simplest: true abundance starts from the inside out. If the mind is clear, if the heart is aligned, if actions respect the natural flow, then any external effort multiplies. Ancient rituals teach us that there is no shortcut. There is reverence, discipline, and awareness. What was once magic is now science applied to everyday life. When we understand this, we realize that the empires of the past and the millionaires of today share a silent secret: prosperity is energy, and energy flows to those who honor it. Throughout this journey, you've witnessed how prosperity was treated by the most ancient civilizations, from the banks of the Euphrates, through Egyptian temples, Indian altars, and Chinese halls, to alchemical laboratories and modern industries. Every ritual, every gesture, and every intention carried a simple yet powerful principle: abundance is energy that flows, not something you passively possess. What kings, priests, and alchemists knew is that money is not just an object, but a reflection of consciousness. It responds to respect, discipline, intention, and inner harmony. Gold was merely a symbol of the sun, the goddess, balance, and empires flourished when this energy was honored. Today, Currency has changed, cities have grown, but the law remains: whoever understands the flow of prosperity multiplies not only riches, but possibilities, opportunities, and freedom. The secret that has stood the test of time is within everyone's reach. It doesn't require temples, altars, or ancient mantras. It begins within you, in your mind, in your heart, and in the choices you make every day. Planning clearly, acting with purpose, cultivating gratitude, respecting cycles, and allowing money to circulate fairly and consciously are modern ways to honor the same principles that built empires. And now, the question is, are you ready to apply this knowledge to your own life? To look at prosperity differently and transform not just your finances, but your entire reality. The ancients left clues, and with every gesture you make, you can activate the same energy that made kings and civilizations prosper. If you want to continue this journey and discover more ancient secrets applicable to the modern world, subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and like this video. Every gesture you make is a way of opening doors to new discoveries and energies of abundance. Remember, wealth was never just gold. It's about consciousness, intention, and flow. And now, you hold the key.